Welcome, everyone, to another Ask the Experts workshop. I am Dr. Pamela Hurst Della Pietra, founder of Children and Screens, Institute of Digital Media and Child Development, host of the series. As many of you know, Children and Screens is one of the nation's leading nonprofits that advances and supports science on the topic of digital media use and children and teens' cognitive, psychosocial, emotional, behavioral, and physical well-being and development. We provide research grants, convene interdisciplinary experts, and curate articles and supplements in top scientific publications. In response to the devastating pandemic, we have brought together experts in the field to provide you and your family with the tools and resources you may need to manage digital media use this summer. In addition, we are funding 3 outstanding research projects that will investigate the short and long-term impacts of digital media use during this pandemic. On to today's conversation. We would like to extend a big thank you in advance to our experts who will explore what we know about the digital media lives of teens and tweens and help you facilitate healthy and honest conversations with your family about their social media use. A big thank you to all of them for sharing their time and expertise, and for you for joining us. Our panelists have reviewed the questions you submitted and will answer as many as they can. If you have additional questions during the workshop, please type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will answer as many questions as time permits. We are recording today's workshop and hope to upload a YouTube video in the coming days. You'll receive a link to the YouTube channel tomorrow where you can find videos from our past webinars as well. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our moderator, Dr. Larry Rosen. Dr. Rosen is a renowned research psychologist, educator, and author, known internationally as an expert in the psychology of technology. He serves as professor emeritus at California State University, where he was previously the chair of the psychology department. We are so grateful to have Dr. Rosen with us today. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you, Pam. Thanks for the nice introduction, too. Before hearing our great panel of speakers, what I'd like to do is provide a bit of context or set the table for their in-depth talks by briefly introducing 4 studies that I think will give you a sense of teens and social media. The first one is through Common Sense Media, which is a well-respected organization. And in 2012, and again in 2018, they asked teens the following question: how often do you use social media? In 2012, 34% said they used it more than once a day. Staggeringly, just 6 years later, that number had doubled to 70% using social media at least once a day. I think that's pretty salient, and it tells you a little bit more about social media. In some of our other research, by the way, we are finding that the average teen has an active presence on 6 social media sites. That is a lot of social obligation that they're facing. The second study in my own work, for the last 3 years, I've been examining smartphone behavior of high school seniors. We've been using an app called Moment that tells me how many times a day the phone is unlocked and how many minutes a day it stays unlocked. It is clear and a bit shocking that these teens unlock their smartphone about 70 times a day, which if you do the calculations, if you assume they sleep 8 hours a day, which they don't, that's about every 15 minutes. And in total, they use it for almost 270 minutes a day, which is about 4.5 hours. So if you kind of do a little bit of math, what you find is that they unlock their phone, they go on for an average of about 4 minutes, then they lock their phone, take about 10, 11 minutes, unlock it again, go on for 4 minutes all the time. And as we're going to find out later on, all day and all night too. In order to further understand what they're doing with their smartphones, I've been having students also email me weekly screenshots from their iPhones or their Android phones. And what these give me is information about what they're actually doing. So what is very clear when you look at the weekly time spent through screen time or through Android's digital well-being, that the most time that these kids are spending is on social media by far. It is the #1 use of their smartphone. And of course, not surprisingly, the 2 most popular social media sites that they go on right now are Instagram and Snapchat. Screen time also gives you more information though. It tells you what happens when the teen first unlocks their phone and what icon they choose to tap on. That icon, of course, is a social media icon, and again, usually either Instagram or Snapchat. And then finally, it also gives you notifications and where the notifications come from. And again, not surprisingly, almost all the notifications that they get come from some sort of communication issue, but mostly social media. So they're really spending a large chunk of that 4.5 hours a day using social media. And then finally, a very interesting sort of neuropsych study out of Santa Barbara examined changes in cortisol levels and interleukin levels. Now, cortisol measures stress and arousal. Interleukin measures inflammation. And what they did is they had a family with a mother, a father, and a teenager. And in the morning, each of them took a swab which measured both those levels from their saliva, that measured both of those levels of cortisol and interleukin. And then 30 minutes later, they took a second swab. So what we could look at in that study is how much does their arousal increase and how much does their inflammation increase. And then before they did the study, they asked each of the participants, teenagers and parents, how much they used each of many different tools, but among the most popular, of course, were email and social media. So when they looked at fathers and what caused the increase in cortisol, in stress or inflammation between wakening and 30 minutes later, the only variable that related to that was email. So you can imagine fathers waking up in the morning, they've got a ton of email from their boss or from their coworkers, and they've got to respond, and that makes them anxious. With teenagers, of course, you can probably guess that the only technology use responsible for an increase in both stress and inflammation is social media. So without further ado, let's meet our first speaker, who is Dr. Linda Charmarian. Sorry, Linda Charmarian, thank you. Linda is a senior research scientist at Wellesley Center for Women. As director of the Youth Media and Wellbeing Research Lab, she was co-principal investigator of a middle school social media pilot study funded by Children and Screens in 2017 and 18. Currently, she's conducting a 3-year National Institute of Health grant to follow middle school students and their parents longitudinally across time to determine the health effects of early smartphone use, social media, and gaming, and also piloting a free week-long summer workshop to empower youth to use digital media to explore their identity and their self-efficacy and to strengthen those online relationships that they have, particularly during the social isolation of COVID-19. Linda's going to start us off with a look at the current research on adolescent social media use from the good to the bad to the ugly.
Thank you so much, Larry, for your lovely introduction. And thank you so much to Pam for inviting all of us to speak with you all today. I would love to, okay, let me see, okay, here we go. I'm trying to share the screen and it's working. So, so back before, if you were born before the 1980s, everybody was worried about your media use in terms of TV and being on TV too much. Nowadays, it's the online environment that is ubiquitous. It's here to stay. Let's all figure out together how to navigate this new digital world that our teens are in. Back in even just 5 years ago, the social media sites that youth were using mirrored kind of what the adults were using. Facebook was the most important one, most commonly used one. And if you look just 3 years later, Facebook started to slide, it started to switch positions with Instagram. And YouTube started becoming more recognized as a social media site because of the fact that you could upload content, you can interact with comments and subscribe to channels and create profiles in that way. If you look at it by different types of populations, like for instance by gender, the use of social media, there's some differences, some group differences. The top 3 of the YouTube, Snapchat, and Instagram are equally as interesting to boys and girls. But as you can see, girls gravitate more towards Pinterest, TikTok, and House Party. If you don't know what House Party is, it's a group chat where you can kind of hang out and as a group, a live video chat. Boys kind of tend to gravitate towards Twitch, which is a gaming social media platform. Visco is also very, very popular with the girls. It's a photo sharing app. And as you can see, there's some gender differences. When we were following our youth from pre-pandemic times, we wanted to kind of see if we collected data during this time, if there'd be any kind of changes in social media use and the different sites that they used. And can you guess, what social media site became more popular during spring of 2020? So in the fall, Snapchat was the biggest, most popular site, and TikTok was second. 22% of youth in middle school indicated that that was their favorite site. And nowadays, this data was just collected in June, 42%. It's risen in ranks. It's the #1 most favorite site for the middle school youth. And it turns out that, I was just talking to Emily earlier this morning that the most downloaded app in the first quarter of 2020 happens to be TikTok in the US. So a lot of people come and ask us about if social media sites are created equal, should I be worried about one site more than others? When I think about it, I think about the different affordances or features that social media sites can give users. There's privacy. Can you be accountable for what you post up? Is your real name involved? Are there traces? Does it disappear? Is it archived forever? There's the notion of popularity. There's, some sites lend itself to more need for social validation and approval, liking, commenting, persuasion. Some sites are about trying to influence you to buy certain things or to think a certain beauty ideal is the highest and best. It can kind of help kind of sort those pure norms and make it seem like everybody's doing these acts. Sometimes they're risky acts. Looking at different sites, just as examples like YouTube, unless you're a YouTuber, you're a content creator. If you're a passive viewer, you're not looking for validation, not trying to get people to like you, or nobody knows what you're navigating towards. Except there is these algorithms that sometimes expose you to some unwanted content. So it's up to you to kind of regulate that. For Snapchat, there's increased privacy for the user because, things disappear, they expire, it's ephemeral. It reduces accountability though. So sometimes you might post things that you might not normally post, in a normal circumstance. The streak system of Snapchat increases social obligations. So some people like that because it increases connections with their friends, but sometimes it's also a lot of anxiety because you're not sure, you don't want to disappoint people if you break the streak. Instagram, a lot of people know that it's about the likes and creating a certain vibe, a certain aesthetic. Influencers want to suggest what is valued out there, and it tends to invite the whole notion of curated selves, that you want to put your best self forward, a lot of impression management going on. And so another thing that researchers grapple with, is this divide between frequency and content. A lot of people are asking, quantity questions. Is this too much, too often? How many hours is the limit? What's the minimum, maximum? It really has to do with the context. What are the number of minutes being used for? Is it something productive? Is it something that's helping to connect people that otherwise can't be connected? Is it to distract themselves from schoolwork? The number of sites Larry mentioned earlier that, youth are on 6 different sites, a lot of them. And should we be concerned about that? It all depends on, is it displacing time that could be spent on other things? Or is it something that helps them feel, that they are connecting with other people, they're coping with some stress? Sometimes the number of sites doesn't equate with how many minutes that they're on it. Some people are very quick scrollers and some people actually create content and it might take them a lot of time. The number of friends and followers you have, that also affects how much you value the sites. There's more social obligation, like what Larry was saying. The higher your network size, sometimes the more time you might need to scroll through everybody's updates, right? So that's something to look out for. People are differentially susceptible to the positives and negatives of social media sites. It could depend on your age. It's not the same age that it's right for everybody to start social media. Some people are better at self-regulation than others. Some people are more affected by social comparisons and affects their self-esteem. It depends on your social network. If your network is going to be a teasing culture, maybe not so easy to maintain healthy behaviors. Maybe you have a fear of in-person social competence, and so you dive into the online context to compensate. So it all depends on your motivations also for what you're doing on social media. Now, the quality of the interactions that you have on social media really, really matter. There's positive ones, a lot of people hear about the negative ones, but the positive ones are people are giving and receiving social support, especially during this COVID-19 time. People are finding affinity groups, people that are like-minded, that are like them in ways that might be hidden or maybe stigmatized. Maybe you're an activist and you want to find out what other people are doing out there for civic engagement purposes. There's ways of raising awareness. It's a great information sharing platform, and it could increase your sense of belonging. Of course, there's the negative things that are always publicized to provoke a lot of fear in a lot of parents and educators, about the cyberbullying, the unwanted sexual content, hate messages, perpetuating unrealistic beauty stereotypes, which Cara is going to be talking about in detail in her presentation. So what do the teens say? Researchers are studying teen use of social media sites, but what do the teens say about its use? According to the Pew latest research, there's a lot of positive to say about it, about the sense of feeling connected and interacting with more diverse groups of people, maybe seeing different sides of somebody, exploring different identities, social identities, somebody's race, somebody's sexual orientation, interest in Minecraft, those kinds of things. It kind of bridges the geographical divide. And more often than not, more 2/3 of people are saying that it's definitely a positive side to it. Of course, there's people that kind of on the less than half side, they're seeing drama. Sometimes it has to do with personal drama or a drama that they are vicariously experiencing that other people are experiencing. They are feeling pressure to look good all the time. That whole impression management of best selves management and posting content that'll get an audience, to validate that they had a great photo or they had a great comment or joke. And a small sector, a fourth, which shouldn't be dismissed, is that they do feel worse about their own lives sometimes when they compare with other people. And that's where a lot of parents and adults can come in and kind of help them manage some of those feelings. In our summer workshops that we're piloting to help middle schoolers kind of have more healthy social media use, we ask them to do certain exercises, like, what can you do to boost well-being on your social media sites? You have a lot of agency to influence the culture of your site. So these are some memes that people showed as examples of what we could do to kind of be more positive online. A lot of people ask about, does social media cause depression? And no, there's no definitive causal links, although there's some studies that show some very strong associations. A lot of times depression, we don't know if the depression came before the social media use or if the social media use kind of exacerbated the depression. And so sometimes it has to do with the behaviors that one has online. Maybe if you're lurking, quote unquote, just browsing and not actively, connecting with other people, that lends itself to kind of the social comparison mode and feeling like everybody else is having much more fun than I am. And so there's that fear of missing out on, the best selves. It should be noted that there's some studies that point that it's not just the people that use social media a lot that have depressive symptoms. There's also some evidence that people who don't use it enough are also depressed. So with depression along comes anxiety. Oftentimes people are wondering, okay, yes, all this scrolling, all this keeping up with content, what if you don't get any feedback? What if you don't get, if you get negative feedback, people tease you, you become more aware of other people's issues and the world's issues, with the pandemic and the fears and social distancing. People are bombarded by and overloaded with a lot of the information that they have of the people that they are connected to. There's this notion of doom scrolling that some people have kind of typed in a question about, people are looking for that catastrophic news. And just like I said, that sometimes people are gravitating towards like people are trying to create their best selves personally, but the news media, their job is to kind of bring out the most headline, inducing people trying to get their attention, trying to get the most catastrophic kind of news out there to get those viewers, get the attention. And sometimes it's easy to kind of get lulled into thinking that the whole world is gone down, gone down in flames when you're in this mode. And it would be helpful for adults to kind of notice if their youth are in that mode. When we looked and compared to just this notion of fear of missing out pre-pandemic in the fall to just this past month in June, that worry of people having fun without me, friends having fun without me, is the same. Doesn't matter if you're socially distancing or not. That was surprising. But there is this sense that there's some evidence now that shows that maybe people aren't posting every single update. It's not as important anymore to post all those updates as it was before. They're taking more breaks from social media. They're avoiding social media because it overwhelms them. There's some evidence that maybe the youth are taking care of themselves and trying to take some breaks from some of this doom scrolling. I was saying earlier that, the size of the network really matters. And when we looked at, how many people are the middle schoolers following, in the Children and Screens funded study that I did with Megan Marino, we found that there are some people that follow 2,000 people, and some of them are people they do not know, like celebrities, 154 celebrities. Can you imagine all those updates that you have to keep up with? It's a lot of time and a lot of emotional investment. So this is my last slide, and I just wanted to kind of end on what are people doing right now? Because, with the stress levels of the pandemic and social distancing and being at home and not being at school, what are they doing to help them cope with stress? Some of them had to do with media and online sort of activities, and some of them had to do with needing to be with people that are very important to them. So the number one thing that people said at this time was to spend time with a close friend. I know it's really hard to do that with the recommendations out there. But even with Zoom, I mean, when we've asked, 32% of them are actually feeling relief from their stress by doing the Zoom account. So it does work for some people. It's not for some people. They are tapped out and they're done. And for other people, it's their way to connect. It's their way to hang out. House party, Zoom. People are creating content for TikTok. A third of people in our whole sample are creating content for TikTok. So that's somehow making them, making it a very effective maybe coping mechanism during this time. And as I started the presentation, back in the old days, it was TV that people were worried about, the content. Well, looking here, watching your TV shows. Nowadays it's streamed and now on demand, Netflix and such. It's still something that people go to for stress and coping. And it's another kind of indicator that maybe social media sites aren't only the things to be watching still. Looking at that content on YouTube and Netflix for the youth is also important. So thank you so much for inviting us to do this panel. These are my funders. I'm very, very grateful to them and to all my colleagues and students. If you're interested in learning more about these free virtual workshops for middle school youth, email me and we can connect. Since it's virtual, it's geographically unbounded. And check out my website too. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Linda, for that very fascinating talk and for the interesting look at exactly what kids are doing on social media and what it means. I was interested in a couple of things that you said, but one that struck me, and I've been thinking about this for a long time, is what is technology doing to us, and particularly very young people, when they create things like streaks on Snapchat, or when they create infinite scrolling, on various websites where there's just no end to your scrolling. What kind of effect do you think that has on these tweens when they are basically forced to keep a streak alive? I've talked to some teens about this, and I found out, much to my surprise, that if they go on vacation, before the pandemic, of course, but if they go on vacation, they actually give their passwords to a friend so that the friend can keep the streaks alive. That really feels like maybe a little bit of a manipulation to keep them glued to the screen. What do you think from all of your research?
Yes, it's amazing how a little feature, an affordance of a social media site called a streak could change the way you interact with somebody and the kind of obligations you have to them each and every single day. I mean, those streaks are cut, they are no longer there if you are the one to disappoint the other person, to stop connecting back and forth. I think it's definitely an issue if it's replacing the in-person interactions. The fact that there is evidence that they are connected, that they're friends, that they're close on an app, and that's what they use to show that they're close, that this means something, that you're my best friend. I've heard of, and I've done interviews with students about how angry they get, disappointed they get when these streaks are broken. They feel like it kind of matters over other things that are evidence of being close and being best friends. So I think sometimes the fact that there's a digital footprint, of their friendship, it sort of is a tracking system that for better or for worse could help people feel valued numerically if they see that long streak, and feeling accomplished that way. And unfortunately, that means that some people will need that validation, that external kind of, technology assisted, relationship maintenance tool, when they could just, do the old fashioned, let's get on the phone, let's go and do a bike ride together. So I think that constant need to prove yourself, either as a friend or to prove that you're doing great in life, is exhausting, let's just say, in general.
Thanks, Linda. It's interesting, when you were answering the question, I hearkened back to way back to MySpace. And when MySpace came out, you were to put pictures of your top 8 on your front page. And that was, again, very controversial because it moved from the top 8. Well, why am I not on the top 8? And then it had to finally move it to the top 16. And I don't even remember where they went from there. But it is touching. And I remember we were studying MySpace way long time ago, that people would talk to us about how they felt by getting left off the top 8 or kicked off the top 8. And that it had a tremendous effect on their self-esteem.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to move on to Cara Baggett. Dr. Baggett is a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and her research background is in adolescent substance abuse disorders, also known as SUDS, and overlapping childhood psychopathology. Dr. Baggett's current work focuses on the effects of technology, for example, social media, video gaming, internet use, on the development of these SUDS and psychiatric illnesses in children and adolescents, and ways to use mobile and digital technologies to improve the assessment, monitoring, and treatment of SUDS in adolescents. Finally, Cara is going to talk to us about the relationship between social media use and mental health, a very controversial topic in our field right now.
So thank you for the introduction, Larry. Thanks, Pam, again for inviting me to speak today. So I'm going to start off with a fairly long-ish video. It's about 4 minutes in length. And then I will talk a little bit afterwards to give it some context. So let's get started with the video first.
It's true. Only the names have been changed.
My name is Jordan, and this is me.
Only the names.
I am a young, pretty, happy girl. I have a hot body, a dull face, tons of friends, and I live a fancy life. Every day, I wake up and I share my wonderful life with amazing people who love me.
Haven't changed. The story you were about to hear is
They love my shiny hair. They say my smile is the cutest. Then my eyes tell amazing stories. They say my body is so hot I could model for Victoria's Secret. Yes, sometimes comments are not that polite. I get a lot of, damn bitch, your ass drives me crazy. If my girlfriend had your boobs, I wouldn't cheat on her. I want to bang you right now. I don't respond to those comments, but I think it is quite flattering.
only the name.
Who doesn't want to be desired? Be the center of attention.
Only the name. Haven't changed.
I love that feeling.
The story you were about to
I
hear
feel powerful,
is true.
influential,
Only the name.
in control. I feel loved, and it feels so good. There is one very important thing I forgot to tell you about me. I am just lonely. I don't have that many friends. I mean, real friends. I live my life through your eyes, through that fake love you give me. Yes, I said fake. Fake love, fake life, fake friends, fake pictures. What you don't see is what I put myself through to feed this hunger for more love, more likes. I show you my fake breakfast, but what I don't mention is that this is the only meal I'll have today. I show you my fake smile, pretending I haven't been crying all night. I only show you my perfect body when I've been starving and denying myself to get the perfect fake lingerie shot. What I never show you is that I hate myself so bad.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop there and just switch screens here if you'll bear with me. Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about social media and teen mental health. So Larry mentioned already sort of the most frequently used social networks, network sites for teenagers. This data is as of September 2019. It's a little misleading. Like Larry said, kids are on about 6 or more social media sites. So while a lot of teens use Facebook, it's not necessarily the most frequently used social networks. So they don't spend a ton of time on it. So Instagram and Snapchat are the most commonly used, following YouTube actually. And TikTok use has increased pre-COVID from September 2019 to March 2020 by 16%. So there could be a lot of fluctuation in use of sites over very short periods of time. And so when we look at the mental health aspect of social media and the impact it has on youth, Here we see that green is sort of net positive, and we heard Linda talk a little bit about some of the positives. And then like this darker, deeper red is the net negative. So we see that YouTube has sort of a net positive effect on young people. And I think that's in many ways for the reasons that Linda said, because there really is no need for social validation. And you can be kind of anonymous actually on YouTube. And so then as we see across, as we move from net positive to net negative, we move from Twitter to Facebook to Snapchat to Instagram, being rated as the most negative in terms of mental health impact. And so looking at social media and sort of comparing oneself with others really has an impact on one's thoughts. So we hear kids saying that other people are better than me, people are having a better time than me, other people look better than me. And so those thoughts then reverberate and have an impact on our feelings. We see low self-worth, low self-confidence, sadness, jealousy. And then that can further impact the way that we behave in real life, as well as physical health. And it can become a vicious cycle. And so social media use can influence a number of things, right? So like poor sleep, we heard about online harassment, poor self-esteem, body image, and then that can lead to sort of more significant mental health issues like depressive symptoms or even a full-blown depression. So in the next few slides, I pulled from Jean Twange's work. She's at San Diego State University. The numbers on these graphs aren't so important. What I really want everyone to focus on is really the trends. So here in yellow, we see SNS, that's social networking sites. So we see that there's this critical point at about half hour a day, that after that, as we increase our time on social media, we see decrease in happiness. And all this work is done in adolescents 13 to 18. Here we see percent low well-being on the y-axis. So well-being is really defined as sort of self-esteem, life satisfaction, and happiness. So if we look at the bold line at the top, we see again, there's this sort of critical point at about half an hour of exposure to social media a day. But after that half hour exposure, as we increase exposure, we see increased risk of one or more suicide-related outcome. So that's anything like suicide attempt, a suicide intent, or thoughts about suicide. In the middle sort of dashed line, we see again past that half hour critical point as we increase our digital media use per day. We see increases in happiness, and in the bottom gray sort of solid line, as we increase past a half an hour per day, we see sort of low well-being. We see the same things around suicide and depression. So again, there seems to be this half hour just sort of like cut point, but when you increase past that cut point, we see increases in depressive episodes in the top line, increases in considering suicide in the gray dashed line. Following that, in the gray darker line, we see made suicidal comments, and the dashed line, a suicide attempt. And so, as was mentioned before by Larry, and this I believe are the statistics he was referencing, is that social media use has been increasing drastically, right? So he had mentioned over the course of a 6-year period that more than once a day, social media use doubled. And we see that 16% of teens are on social media almost constantly, and 27% are on hourly. So that's a lot of use. And so while the data, even the data that I showed you previously and the data that I'm going to talk about next, doesn't show conclusively that social media causes these mental health symptoms, we see that as social media use is increasing over time, we're seeing increased rates of loneliness, for example, among teens over the same period of time. And again, rates, the numbers themselves aren't so important, but looking at sort of the trends, we see increases across ages, 8th, 10th, and 12th graders of loneliness, even though they are more digitally connected with their peers. We've also seen that these issues have become more important for young women. So 27% of young women report that body image is a significant issue. 20% say low self-esteem and low self-confidence, and 15% bullying and cyberbullying. And so we've seen increase in rates of these issues as well, as social media use has increased. A vast majority of adolescents report some type of cyberbullying. About 42% have experienced offensive name calling, 32% spreading of false rumors, 25% receiving explicit images they didn't ask for, and so on. And so if we look at gender, we actually see that cyberbullying occurs pretty equally between boys and girls. However, girls are more likely to experience spreading of false rumors, receiving explicit images they didn't ask for, or having explicit images of them shared without their consent. And then just in terms of substance use, we've also seen that youth 14 to 25 years of age are more likely to use any type of substance to cope with cyberbullying. So primarily we see sort of alcohol use and cannabis use. And so some of my research has been looking at how substance use propagates through social media. So in our own studies, we've found that adolescents use Instagram to sort of glamorize their substance use. So they're more likely to post photos of them or their friends having fun while using substances, primarily marijuana. They're more likely to post about the negative consequences of substance use on Snapchat, and they're least likely to post anything about their substance use on Facebook, mainly because those are the platforms that are the platform that adults mainly use. So their family members, their parents are more likely to be on Facebook and see what they're doing. You know, mental health is a really important issue to focus on for teens. Because we know just in general that 20% of adolescents live with a mental health condition. So 11% have a mood disorder and 8% have an anxiety disorder. And we saw from Linda's presentation that there is some burgeoning evidence, although it's not causal, there's some associations between particularly depression and anxiety and social media use in youth. And then, you know, so that's really important, again, because there are some associations between social media use and suicide. And we've seen rates of suicide really increase in the past 10 years. So right now, suicide is the third leading cause of death in youth ages 10 to 24, but it is the first leading cause of death among adolescent girls. And so that's really important to note because, again, as Linda showed us, you know, on some social media sites, girls and boys use them sort of equally, but overall, girls are more likely to use social media than boys. And also that we know that 90% of teens that die of suicide have an underlying mental illness. And so as parents, what can we do about this? So first of all, it's really important to model appropriate behaviors. So we want to model the behaviors we want to see in our children. So we have to be really careful about spending too much time on social media because our kids see what we're doing, especially now that we're all home together all the time. We have to be really, really careful about what we share and try not to overshare. We also have to be really careful about sharing information about our teens' lives that they may not want shared. We also have to educate ourselves. So for those parents that are not on social media or use it sort of minimally, you should join the same social media platforms that your teens are on and get to know those platforms, get to know the capabilities. You should become friends with your teens on those platforms. So and just sort of use your best judgment, whether they're filtering their posts so you actually don't see everything that they're posting, or if they have fake accounts so that you're not actually following or seeing what they're actually doing or what they're posting. So really, really important, especially since we're all sort of at home together, socially isolating. We should really try our hardest to have sort of phone-free or screen-free family time, where we engage in sort of physical activity, where we do things together as a group, as a family. And it's really important for parents in this time and always really to support the positive non-physical qualities of their teens. So a lot of kids go on social media for sort of validation. And so we as parents should be doing this all the time across the board for all of our children. And we want to initiate sort of open discussion with our teens. So not being judgmental, not being blamey or shamey. We want to talk about with our teens, what are the positives? What do they get from social media? We heard Linda say that the majority of teens actually think that social media has like a net good effect. So we should talk about what those are for our kids. And how they can be validated in the same way in sort of real life scenarios. And then you can sort of transition into discussing the negatives. And again, in a non-judgmental, non-sort of blaming, shaming sort of way. And see if we can help our kids sort of associate the negative things with social media with the social media use itself. We want to set rules and boundaries around social media use. So this is always easier before teens start really heavily engaging in social media. So I always like to tell families that, in elementary school and middle school, whenever kids start like using smartphones, those are when you should set the rules and the boundaries around social media use. So things like, I will follow you on social media, I will have your passwords to your accounts, those things. So if you set those boundaries early, then when kids age, then it's not as shocking and it doesn't seem as quite a large invasion of their privacy. Of course, you want to teach accountability and responsibility of using these sites. There are options for parental controls as well. And then lastly, you really want to monitor changes in mood, behavior, sleep, and just overall well-being and functioning in real life. So if you see that your kid is sleeping more or seems to be more depressed or more anxious, if they're more irritable, if their grades are lagging, things like that, those are indicators that there's a problem and that something should be done, and you can start there. Thanks.
Thanks, Cara. That was absolutely fascinating. I went from amazingly depressed from the video all the way to feeling confident that there are things we can do at the end. And I appreciate you putting all those strategies out there for parents to be able to do. One of the things that you mentioned, actually a couple things you mentioned, but we moved around them a little bit, is you talked about social validation.
Yeah.
And the kind of social validation they get. And I'm older, obviously, and so I still use Facebook. I know that when it approaches my birthday, I start getting anxious because I know everybody's going to know it's my birthday, but how many people are going to wish me a happy birthday? And if I get a few, I'm really miserable, quite honestly, for the day. And sometimes I'll just sit and refresh and just look to see what I'm getting. And I can imagine as an adult, that's a lot of social obligation on my part. What's your sense of the impact of this kind of need for social validation through likes, which, by the way, in our research, likes are the #1 thing that people do on social media. So what's your sense of the impact of getting or not getting the social validation?
Yeah, so part of the research that I do too is looking at how social media sort of actually impacts the brain. So changes in the brain. And so a study that I have done is looking at how likes change your brain. So we actually know, or research suggests, so my study as well as others that have done this, that that you can change sort of the function of the brain in the same way that substance use does it, right? So it changes sort of reward. So when you get the likes, then you feel good, you feel happy, right? And your reward system in the brain is sort of activated and smiling. And when you don't get those likes, like you said, it sort of makes you feel down. And so those behaviors sort of then sort of lead to a cycle, right? So you know what makes you happy, you know what makes you sad. So you'll put out other things that you know will get likes, and you'll sort of engage in behaviors that maybe are detrimental sort of to your functioning, right? So you have to spend more time on social media figuring out what's going to get likes to make you happy. And I think that's this cycle that these kids get into, is that, likes make me feel good. What can I do to draw out more likes? I will change my behaviors. I will do whatever I can to get likes. But we have to keep in mind for these kids that it's not just a behavioral thing. At some point, it does change the brain, and does impact the brain at some point.
And just to follow up on that, from the brain perspective, what kind of changes are you seeing?
Say that again. Sorry, Larry, you cut out.
What kind of changes in the brain are you seeing that indicate, between people who are not getting enough likes, for example? What's the difference?
Yeah, so we see activation in sort of the limbic system of the brain. So this is like our reward, feel good, pleasure center of the brain. So when people are getting likes, and actually when they are giving likes to other people, we see activation in the same area. So it's not just personal social validation. Kids actually feel good about socially validating others as well.
Interesting. Thank you.
Of course.
Maybe there'll be some questions later on about the brain, but I may ask you one later too.
Of course. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Our next speaker, Dr. Emily Weinstein, who is a senior researcher at Project Zero at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Her research examines how social media influence the everyday lives of tweens, teens, and young adults. With Carrie James, Emily currently runs the Digital Dilemmas Project, studying how people of different ages think about thorny dilemmas of network life. Emily's going to talk to us about these digital dilemmas, and then how parents can talk with their children about thoughtful and safe social media use. Thank you very much, and take it away, Emily.
All right, great, Larry. Thanks so much for the introduction. Thanks everyone for being with us. As Larry mentioned, I've spent the last 2 years running the Digital Dilemmas Project with my colleague, Carrie James. And we focused on really trying to understand the dilemmas teens are facing right now in their digital lives, how they think about and navigate tensions, and the ways that adults can better support them. So this has involved collecting data from different sources and contexts through surveys, interviews, observations in schools. And I'm going to draw on some of that data today. Since the pandemic began earlier this year, I've also been working with a fantastic teen researcher, Zoya Uni, on a project tracking viral TikTok content during COVID-19. And we're just digging into the analysis now, but Zoya logged content and themes in trending TikToks every day for 9 weeks, documenting 2,675 different viral videos. So you'll hear me reference some emerging insights from this project too. My aim for today is pretty simple. I'd like to dig into a few current digital dilemmas teens are facing and really make a case for rethinking 3 common instinctive reactions or thoughts that many adults have when it comes to teens and technology. And the reason that this is so important is because rethinking some of our assumptions sets the stage for acknowledging the dilemmas teens are facing and really providing more effective and relevant supports. So the first idea that we're going to reconsider and hopefully reframe for you is a thought that you may have had before while you've looked on at a teen typing furiously on their phone screen, which is, "Ugh, can't you just get off your phone?" or "Why can't you just get off your phone?" One of the things that we have seen so clearly in our Digital Dilemmas project is how much pressure teens feel to stay constantly connected and available, even at times when they don't want to. We've been analyzing responses we collected from more than 3,000 middle and high schoolers who described their worries and challenges about growing up with today's technologies. And one of the themes is this true pressure that they feel to stay connected to others. And their descriptions reveal a sense that failing to be reachable can actually threaten friendships and relationships that they really care about. Before you roll your eyes at this idea, even if it's tempting, it's worth pausing to think about this with a developmental lens in mind. So friends and peer relationships are especially crucial and valued during adolescence. And teens are primed to really want to protect relationships that are important to them and to avoid what they see as anything that could threaten closeness and intimacy. So with this framing in mind, consider a few prototypical quotes that we heard from youth in our research. They say things like, I feel like if you're not connected, then the friendship will fall apart. If you don't text your friends for a while, then they just come up with the dumbest excuse to cut you off. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings if I can't stay in touch with them. Another related theme that we see clearly in our data is the burden that teens feel to stay available for friends who they know are struggling. So they say things like, my biggest worry is that I don't have enough contact with friends who are struggling because I don't want my friends to do something bad just because I didn't respond in time to stop them from harming themselves or worse. So think about this burden on the shoulders of a young teen who's being told just put down your phone and disconnect. It's also really interesting to think about these quotes in light of some other data. So acknowledging that, that you don't have context on the samples that I'm about to refer to, I want to just say that we asked on our project different groups of youth, educators, and parents to weigh in on their knee-jerk reaction to a number of different prompts and dilemmas. Like this one, being a good friend means being available whenever your friend needs you. And we actually used 7-point scales in our survey, but I'm going to simplify the responses here just to give you a glimpse into a relevant trend. So across all three groups, a majority of people agreed that being a good friend means being available whenever your friend needs you. And we see this even more strongly among the adolescent group, where 71% endorse this statement. And this is noteworthy because it means even if your teen doesn't hold this view, it suggests that many of their friends probably do, and therefore expect that being a good friend means that they will be available whenever they're needed. This idea of being available for friends, being a good friend, it might be nice in theory, but what does it actually mean in a world where we have the potential of having 24/7 access to one another? It can really pit the values of disconnecting for self-care and our own well-being against the idea of wanting to be kind and compassionate. So all values that we tell kids and teens are really important. Interestingly, look at the data for a different but related idea. If someone texts you, you should respond as quickly as possible. Here we see a shift. A majority of adults disagree and youth are divided. So we saw before, most people think that being a good friend means being available whenever your friend needs you, but we're less clear about what kind of response time this actually requires. And teens in particular are divided here, and this is a confusion that we hear coming through in their more open-ended descriptions as well. I wanted to share this just to acknowledge really that the norms and expectations are not so clear when it comes to reconciling what it means to be a good friend in a digital age and how much connection is too much. What's reasonable, what's desirable, and even what's expected. And right now we're in a pandemic and teens are facing a very typical developmental drive to preserve and protect their closeness with friends, but during a very atypical moment when many of the usual occasions they would have for hanging out and making inside jokes are displaced because of the ways that we're social distancing. Just to be clear, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't look for occasions to help teens disconnect. In fact, it can definitely be a relief for teens to have times of day when they are totally offline, as Cara mentioned. But hopefully just having this framing can spark a bit of empathy and understanding about some of the pressures that they might be feeling that can make it hard to unplug, and can shift us away from what Cara described. I loved the idea of avoiding a blamey and shamey approach. The second idea I want to talk about relates to this question, what are you even doing on there? Which many of us have probably looked on and wondered before. TikTok has obviously become a big part of what many teens are doing behind their screens, as Linda said earlier. And I want to share a bit about what we're seeing in the viral TikTok study, particularly because a lot of adults seem to have a super negative view of TikTok. much of what we see in the viral content is people coping with the current moment through circumstantial humor or sharing moments of their everyday lives in ways that are relatable and really give a sense of connection during this time of isolation. So this includes viral videos featuring family members together in a lot of cases. And I wanted to just show you one example. I think Kelly's gonna cue up the video quickly. For those of you who aren't on TikTok, just give you a taste of some of this content. So this is a video of a dad who was sharing how he recreated Splash Mountain for his daughter after their trip to Disneyland was canceled. And just check out, he has a little spritz bottle in his hand. Watch that as we watch this short video. Thanks, Kelly. Of course, there are also tons of videos of viral videos of dances where people are doing their own renditions of dance moves choreographed to trending songs. And there's a lot of content like this where teens are creating and are really recreating dances that they've seen. So this is an example of a TikToker, Charlie. Go ahead, Kelly.
Why you so negative? Let them all talk, they ain't relevant. Baby girl, you can just stay a bit. Calm down, we can just settle this, yeah. Inhale, exhale, breathe slowly, right? Calm down. Why you so negative?
Thanks, Kelly. I think if you stop sharing your screen, I'll be able to jump back on. Great. All right, let's shift back into present. So I wanted to just share these examples in part because it's a lot of what we're seeing, but also it's interesting and noteworthy. We've for years heard adults lamenting that social media has made teens sedentary or seems to be killing creativity and interfering with family relationships. And now we have a study where we're seeing examples of teens up and learning dance videos, creating content with their siblings. And this is certainly not to say that it's all positive on TikTok, definitely not. And we have to acknowledge that the content that a particular teen sees on their feed is individualized and driven by algorithms. So I'm not suggesting this kind of viral content is an indicator of what your teen's TikTok experience is like. But I just wanted to acknowledge that it's not all negative. There's fun, funny, relatable content. And it is really worth asking teens about what they do and see on the platform with a more open mind to what might be true positives for them and ways that it can be fun or make them feel connected, again, during this time of a lot of isolation. With that said, I want to also acknowledge two digital dilemmas relevant to TikTok and social media during COVID. The first is how hard it can be for teens to regulate their habits and how much time they're spending on a particular platform. So even if the content they're looking at is fun and uplifting, like the videos we just watched, the total time spent might be bringing them down. So this video screenshot is from a pilot that Carrie, James, and I worked on with Common Sense Media for an activity that we've been developing and testing around habits. And we have teens first actively think about and reflect on all of their digital habits, everything that's part of their digital routine that's become the default or the norm. And then we have them choose one habit that they want to change. So that's really important. We don't tell them which habit they should change. They choose it for themselves. And then they come up with a personal challenge that they do while they document their progress over a week or two. So this teen, the My TikTok withdrawal video, this teen was trying to curb her TikTok use, and her documentary style reporting really acknowledged how hard it was for her to cut back to just 1.5 or 2 hours a day. And I wanted to mention this example because we found that while teens often resist top-down rules off the bat, so us telling them, cut back your TikTok use or keep your phone in this particular place during this particular time, older teens in particular can be quite aware of the habits that are problematic for them. And in our work with teens, we found that if we start off by asking teens what digital habits they want to change, it can help to really get more buy-in right off the bat. And then we're in a position also to be able to help them come up with strategies and supports for actually sticking to the habits that they've said they want to change. Another dilemma we've been hearing about over the last few weeks is just the challenge of teens seeing photo or video evidence of friends together blatantly violating social distancing, which is really tricky and raises dilemmas for families who are adhering more strictly to distancing. And this really connects to the normal developmental drives I mentioned earlier to want to protect and preserve closeness with your friends. And remember, teens have, in many cases, felt more disconnected than their friends probably at any other moment. And while there aren't easy answers here, I think if we recognize this concern and this underlying desire to really feel close to people that they care about and protect that intimacy, we can prioritize empathy in our conversations, but also work with teens to brainstorm ways that they might connect with their friends that feel really meaningful, even if they're from a distance, and that really get at that underlying drive and motivation. Last, I wanted to speak to the well-intentioned impulse of shouting at teens to think before you post, or relatedly doubling down on the message that every text, snap, or Instagram picture can be public and permanent. It's not that these aren't really important and valuable messages, they definitely are, but navigating digital footprints is often much more complicated than these messages assume. And our research with teens suggests that this kind of caution can even backfire and amplify their anxiety. One reason for this is the reality of peer co-construction, which is essentially the idea that friends and peers can post content that a teen doesn't want online and wouldn't have chosen to post. So the peers are actually co-constructing their digital footprints. They're not the sole authors. And this suggests that they're not always in as much control of their digital footprints as a comment like "think before you post" suggests. I also want to describe another reason that this message can fall short using a recent example related to Black Lives Matter. So Forbes reported that on Tuesday, June 2nd, more than 28 million people posted Black squares on their Instagram accounts. You may have seen some of these. And the trend began, according to the New York Times, as an attempt by the music industry to pause business as usual in response to the protest. Yet it quickly shifted into people posting Black boxes on their own feeds to show solidarity and support, and then to people posting Black boxes and writing that they were muting themselves for a variety of reasons, which included white folks saying that they were quieting their own voices in an effort to amplify Black voices on social media. So if you imagine that you're a teen on social media and you see these squares and perhaps you see a message about what they mean that really resonates with you and your desire to support Black Lives Matter and the movement, and maybe you want to show support for the protest, so you decide to post a square on your own feed. But then you start to see people saying that the square is actually backfiring. This was one concern, that people were using the hashtag Black Lives Matter along with these posts, and that because of that, they were actually drowning out important and relevant information that Black Lives Matter activists were trying to get out. Or perhaps you see someone, again, something that came up, perhaps you see someone saying that if you identify as Black, you definitely shouldn't be silencing your voice. And even people suggesting that maybe this whole movement was a tactic from those who oppose Black Lives Matter to mute or slow the movement down during a crucial moment. Or maybe you see people saying that posting a square is just an obvious act of self-centered virtue signaling and it really doesn't help anyone. So you're a teen who posted a Black square earlier in the day, and suddenly you feel like you've done something very wrong. And you're trying to decide what to do next. Should you delete it, even though you know people have already seen it? Should you leave it? Should you post something else? Maybe you're watching this entire Black square trend unfold, and you're a teen who identifies as a person of color, now watching peers who you've never known to care about systemic racism suddenly posting Black squares on their feeds. And it feels really disingenuous and infuriating. These are all real emotions and dilemmas and tensions that teens are facing right now behind their screens. We're in a moment when social media is playing a major role in a defining movement, and teens are engaging with Black Lives Matter in different ways, seeing different kinds of content and making sense of it in different ways related to their identities. And these dilemmas are current, and I think it's probably clear to you also why they're not easily resolved by messages to simply think before you post. That really doesn't help teens navigate the full breadth of challenges and tensions that they face in this landscape. I felt I needed to make this point explicitly, in part because as we've looked at the messages adults share with teens about social media, they so often emphasize this kind of caution or specific warning. These are all real quotes from adults in our study describing well-intentioned messages that they share with teens about social media. At a minimum, I hope you can recognize the complexity of the digital landscape and the need for conversations and guidance that go beyond the impulse of just saying that what you do online can't be erased. So I hope you'll think of this as an invitation to ask teens in your life about what they're seeing and how they're thinking about the content they see and share during this really important moment. Just to close out, if I were to try and sum up everything that I just shared in one take-home message, it would be this: empathy over eye rolling. So we need to have conversations about technology with the teens in our lives, and also to approach these conversations with this attitude of empathy over eye rolling. For sure, the eye rolling is tempting and understandable, but when we prioritize empathy and really acknowledge the positives and the pressures that they face, we set the stage for being able to help them navigate the very real tensions of the current moment. Thanks. Larry, back to you.
Thanks. Let me get myself on here. There we go. Thanks very much, Emily. I really appreciate seeing someone reframe a problem. And I like the way you reframed it as digital dilemmas rather than major problems. I see I talk to a lot of parents, and probably 5 times a week I get long email messages from parents describing their kids, what's going wrong. Some of them say, I would try to keep the phone away from the kids an hour before they go to bedtime, and then we come in at 3 in the morning and the phone's back on the bed. What do we do? And the thing I hear from many parents is, what did I do wrong? And I think that's a difficult question to ask, but how would you talk to a parent when they said to you, what did I do wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the benefits of, I have a background in developmental science, and I think it's for me as a parent, I know it's so liberating because I can think about everything that I'm experiencing in the context of what's going on developmentally and recognize that these are really normal drives that are, I don't have a teen, but that are in many cases intersecting with super powerful and compelling technologies. So we think about the very typical adolescent drive to want to connect with friends, to want to seek feedback. Technology did not create these features of adolescence, but for sure it's intersecting with and amplifying them in powerful ways. So I think just recognizing first that this is not something of your creation in many cases, but also that we do have a really important role to play. And I think it isn't always possible for sure, but when there are occasions to really get teens buy-in, I think that can be incredibly powerful. We've just seen so consistently that when that is a possible starting point, like having teens really identify and buy into the problem you're trying to solve, it's really helpful. And one of the things that can help do that is actually talking to teens about the barriers and the reasons that they're not adhering to a rule. Because in some cases, they'll then acknowledge a challenge or a pressure that they feel that's very addressable. So if you think about the example of like parents saying, okay, it's dinner, everyone's put your phone away. And maybe in your house, dinner happens at a slightly different time every night. And so it feels really sudden. And you think about the dilemmas I raised earlier, teens suddenly feel like their phone is out of their hand and they didn't get time to tell their friends that they're gonna be offline. And you might feel like that's completely unnecessary, but it can be as simple as, if you understand that that's the barrier, it might be as simple as recognizing that a 15-minute warning to wind down conversations and tell friends that you're gonna pause is actually enough to change the buy-in to the rule or the family practice. So that's just one example. Of course, not always possible, but I think when it is, at least starting there can be a really helpful strategy.
Thanks. I have a question maybe for Linda here that I think is relevant to what she's been talking about and doing. During COVID-19, parents became teachers, and they had to spend a lot of time homeschooling, home teaching their kids. And when they weren't home teaching, which, by the way, was a horrendous nightmare. I tried doing it with our grandkids a couple days to help their parents out. And I was thoroughly exhausted by about 8 o'clock at night, willing them to go to sleep so I could go to sleep. But what a lot of parents are doing, I think, during COVID-19 being sheltered, is allowing their kids to use their technology more. A lot of reasons, there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think one is that the parents just need a break. And is this a problem? Because what we're seeing in some of the early data that we've been collecting with screen time is that instead of 4.5 hours a day on their smartphone, they're spending 9, 10, 11 hours a day on their smartphone. What are your thoughts about this? What can parents do to kind of balance their kids' lives here?
Yes, it really depends on the household too. I mean, I know with some data that we were looking in terms of the amount of gaming that's happening nowadays, in terms of giving parents a break and being on technology for hours at end. It's not like the quantity of time that they're on it. It's actually if they are getting meaningful social interactions with their close friends on Discord, if they're doing that for 8 hours and it's not displacing time away from meals and spending time with family and getting exercise and doing other things that to take care of themselves, then maybe it's not something to worry about in terms of the quantity. But I think it's really all about what are the interactions that are happening. Are they going and they don't have any close gaming friends to be with, and so they go online and get some strangers that maybe adults in another country to like come and play with them, and maybe they're going to start grooming them to do things for them, to give them V-Bucks for their games. So just the fact that they're on games is not the problem. It's more about, are you able to know and monitor who they're interacting with? What's the purpose? Are they connecting with other people that they know and continue with a relationship? Or are they, spending hundreds of dollars on games with your credit card, unfiltered, unmonitored? So, yeah, I think it's a strange time where a lot of these rules have probably been relaxed, and there's a lot of guilt going around with parents with that. But I think technology, remember, it's not necessarily an evil thing. It's a tool. It's a tool that could be used for the good of society. It could be used as a distraction. It could be used for educational purposes. And so even just thinking about technology in general as not just the enemy, like it could be your friend, during this time to give you a break, but also, so I think it's not all or nothing.
Thanks, Linda. I have a bigger issue question. And that is, teenage years are an incredibly volatile time of social development, cognitive development, all forms of development. Spending more time on social media may be affecting that. They may be seeing things that are before their developmental age, before their developmental abilities. How do each of you think that social media itself is driving development in teens, preteens, and teens? Let's see. How about Kara? You get to tackle that one first.
Sure, happy to. So I think it's it's hard. So I do think kids are probably exposed to some things. Like there's data on early exposure to pornography, for example, right? So kids may see pornography or sexually explicit things at an inappropriate age. But there's also data to suggest that kids are sort of developmentally slowed by being sort of so digitally connected. So again, there's no data, really rigorous data looking at causality, that social media causes things. But there are data showing associations between rise in social media use and like, for example, kids not driving as early, right? So not getting their driver's license by age 16, so really delaying it until young adulthood, right? Kids aren't moving out of their homes. They're living with their parents longer. Things like that, where we expect adolescents, teenagers to sort of individuate, start to develop some autonomy, things like that. We do see that kids are doing that later. And sort of in my area of substance use, other than sort of marijuana use and vaping, use of substances in teens are going down, which I think is sort of driven by the fact that substance use is really a social activity. Kids would get together like in person and use drugs. So if you're sitting at home and looking at a screen, then you're not out partying with your friends. And so it's good that they're not using drugs, but it's also bad that they're actually not hanging out with their friends in person. So I do think that kids are sort of putting off becoming their own people, individuating from their parents, but, and also engaging in sort of developmentally appropriate behaviors.
Thanks, Cara. Emily, what are your thoughts about this?
I really appreciate Cara's sort of taking a generational perspective. I think also a great complement to that is thinking about just on an individual level. And Linda mentioned in her talk this idea of differential susceptibility. So recognizing that individual kids are having really different experiences. And that has to do with characteristics of those kids. So their dispositions and what they're actually bringing to their digital lives, characteristics of their actual social network, like who are they interacting with? And is that a supportive network? Is that a network that makes them feel really anxious and vulnerable? But also their interests and what kinds of things they're seeking out. And in some cases that's hugely positive, and in other cases it's really problematic. And those are just a few. Then we also know, we have data that show that even when teens look at the exact same content on social media, they actually can interpret it in different ways. So it might spark different kinds of thoughts and reactions. In some cases, a teen might look at a picture of someone else in an amazing setting or doing something really cool and feel really inspired. And another teen may look at that exact same image and feel really isolated and do a lot of social comparison and feel like their life just doesn't measure up. So it's worth just keeping this idea of differential susceptibility in mind as we try and understand and really grapple with the question about developmental impacts, because social media can really amplify, in some cases for teens, what's going really well for them and what their strengths are. And in other cases, it can really amplify some of the challenges and vulnerabilities that they're grappling with.
Thanks, Emily. Linda, I have a different question for you. As we're running out of time, it's something that I'm really interested in. In terms of social media, it can be pretty overwhelming. It can take a lot of time, as we've all talked about. It can take away from other activities. But one of the things that we're seeing in our research, and pretty much I've seen in every other sleep research, is that parents are being a little more lax with kids and allowing them to take their phones to bed at night. And we know that the National Sleep Foundation says you must get rid of it out of your room an hour before bedtime. Instead of doing that, they're basically encouraging, people are encouraging kids to do that, which may cause some problems. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, our team just happens to be working on a sleep paper on just that very topic, and we're looking at the idea that it's about the content that you're looking at. I mean, are you creating content? Are you scrolling and lurking and being distressed by the state of the world right before bed? Are you looking at violent content? Are you trying to connect with somebody else so that you can feel better before you go to bed? So it all depends on the motivations and intentions of the kind of things you're doing on your phone before bed.
Okay. And again, kind of a toss-up question, but I'll start with Cara. In terms of social media and in terms of what it's doing to us, maybe long-term, you had mentioned brain research that you're doing. And I'm fascinated with brain research just because I think it's kind of where the field of psychology is going. What do you think are the long-term results on kids that are basically spending a lot of their time doing virtual communication, doing off the face-to-face kind of communication that we usually have. Are there negative consequences, do you think, to the brain? Are we changing our brains?
Yeah, so it's hard. Those studies have not been done at all by anybody. You know, and so we do know, though, that any activity that we engage in, any sort of repetitive activity, does change the way that our brain sort of, especially during adolescence, changes the structure and the function of the brain. You know, during adolescence is this really, really key period in time for sort of brain development. And so anything that we do frequently during adolescence is going to lead to changes in the brain. And so whether that be social media use, if that's drug use, whatever it is. So I do think that long-term it will have some impact. The brain is very plastic though. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the impact is going to be long-standing. It doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have long-standing detrimental effects. But I do think for teenagers that are on social media for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day, it will have some impact on the brain just because of the period of development that they're in. But we don't have the studies to actually prove that.
Well, thank you very much to all three of you. I'm going to hand it back to Pam.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming and for asking such insightful questions. And thank you so much, Larry, Kara, Emily, and Linda, for a fantastic workshop that will no doubt be the conversation topic at many dinner tables this evening. Please share the YouTube video you'll receive of today's workshop with your fellow parents, teachers, clinicians, researchers, and friends. Our discussions about digital media use and children's well-being will continue throughout the summer with weekly Wednesday workshops. Next week, on Wednesday, July 8th at noon EDT, we will host a conversation about technology addiction. You won't want to miss it. Following that, on Wednesday, July 15th, our experts will share insights into screens and mental health and provide tips on how to help your children and teens thrive. When you leave the workshop, you'll receive a link to a short survey. Please click on the link and let us know what you thought of the workshop today. You'll also be invited to sign up for our next workshops at the end of the survey. And you can find out more information about those on our website, childrenandscreens.com. Thanks again, and everyone stay safe and be well.